how the Sex Pistols influenced Elvis Costello's rise in the United States. This story begins on July 14, 1977. Actually, no, it begins before that. It begins in late 1976 and early 1977 with 6 4-hour studio sessions at Pathway Studios in London. Recorded by Nick Lowe, the first album by one Declan MacManus came together, backed by the California-based country rock act Clover. The album, which came out mid-1977, had 3 singles precede its release, all of which failed to chart. Already dissatisfied with where his band was going, MacManus sought to create an official backing band. He had already donned a new name under the guidance from his then record label, Stiff Records. Previously, when backed in the studio by Clover, he ultimately felt the result didn't live up to his vision of modern music. It was too laid back. More importantly, it didn't fit where he saw music going. He wanted a bigger, sharper, and harder sound, something that had a more monumental impact. And thus, The Attractions was born. Here's where it gets interesting. The band made their live debut on July 14, 1977. Remember that date I threw out earlier? And they performed again 8 days later at an unauthorized performance outside the Columbia Records convention. Now, fully going by the name Elvis Costello, well, he was arrested. July 22, 1977. The day Elvis Costello's debut album, My Aim Is True, was released. The album, backed by Clover, would go on to become the first new wave album to crack the American Top 50. That performance, a stunt really, gained the attention of one Greg Geller. Geller was a record executive at Columbia. The attention Costello garnered through his arresting performance, pun completely intended, led to Geller pulling a few strings and getting Costello and The Attractions signed to Columbia in the United States. And it was here, stateside, that Costello's popularity grew. This year's Model, recorded in the fall of 1977 and January of 1978, would be released in mid-March of 78. This here is my copy, and sure enough, it's on Columbia. One thing I love about this is the red label. Typically with the Columbia logo dispersed around the edge with Columbia written in all caps, this replaces the label name with Costello. I love that. This year's Model, Costello's sophomore album, would include a track written by Costello all the way back in 1974. But prior to that album's recording, Costello would, in 77, rework the song to feature a more abrasive and aggressive tone, with blatant sarcasm criticizing the commercialism of radio. Much of this stemmed directly from the BBC's attempts to censor Sex Pistols' God Save the Queen. But hold tight, there's another connection to the Sex Pistols coming up soon. Decades later, in 2003, Costello would comment on the song's meaning. Oh, you might as well just admit now that radio has nothing to do with music anymore. It's in the advertising business. There's a real skill to programming in an intelligent way, but nobody does that anymore. It's all done by computer, by committee. Radio is absolutely the enemy of music. They are my sworn and mortal enemy, and I will have nothing to do with them. But back in 1977, the transformation took place. Radio Soul became Radio Radio, and that would become the final track on this year's Model. Released in October of 78, Radio Radio reached 29 in the UK charts, but Costello has attributed its lack of success in the charts to radio stations realizing that the lyrics were actually anti-radio, after which the song was essentially dropped. It had been cruising upward until that moment. Let's pivot. Miskel Spillman was an 80-year-old German immigrant from New Orleans and held a record as the oldest host of Saturday Night Live until Betty White broke it in 2010 at the age of 88. She also holds another record, only non-celebrity host to ever host SNL, and this record stands to this day. Spillman was the winner of the Anyone Can Host contest SNL held in 1977. Her entry, which was required to be a 25 words or less statement on why they should host, read, quote, "I'm 80 years old. I need one more cheap thrill since my doctor told me I only have another 25 years left. She won the contest, but her doctor was a decade off. Spillman passed away in 1992 at the age of 95. But it was here in late 1977 that the Sex Pistols come back into the picture. The legendary punk pioneers were booked to perform on the December 17, 1977 broadcast of SNL, but visa issues kept them from traveling to the United States. Replacing the Pistols would be Elvis Costello and the Attractions. The two songs they were charged with performing were 1, Watching the Detectives, and 2, Less Than Zero. Costello felt the first track appropriate. After all, he was inspired by The Clash when writing the song. The latter, however, he felt was too low-key. Similarly, the subject matter being British fascist Oswald Mosley was something Costello felt entirely unrelatable to a US audience. When the time came, the band took the stage. They began Less Than Zero, but almost immediately, Costello turned to them and yelled, "Stop! Stop!" Turning to face the crowd, he stated, "I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there's no reason to do this song here." He then launched into Radio. Elvis Costello was banned from SNL, and many, to this day, consider this year's model to be some of his finest work in a career that spans well over 4.5 decades. If you like videos like this, where I dig into the history of albums that I love from my collection, go ahead and check out this one right here. You might kind of like it. As one YouTube troll said many moons ago, this dude is a damn nerd. I am Andy. This is the FensePost Vinyl channel. I'll see you in the next video.